Welcome, Elizabeth, to the Wins podcast.
Thanks, Amy. I'm excited to be here.
How are you today?
I'm good. I was very cold. And so, as you got to see, I have a blanket on and my hot water. So, I'm uh, cozy now, is probably the best way to put it. I'm cozy and excited to be here.
It's perfect. I do that all the time. I tend to keep either a sweater or blanket on my chair. And the beauty of our virtual world is no one knows, but I'm literally wrapped from waist down in a fluffy blanket.
I think that's what's the best about the virtual space. And I really don't ever want to go back to not being like, I like the virtual space because I can be fully comfortable and allow myself to be like, okay, I can be comfortable, which then lets me be a better person, coach, entrepreneur, all those things because I'm like, oh, I'm cozy and I'm taking care of myself.
Yes. And all of those things we will talk about today. But before we do, so you said you have hot water. Is there anything in it, or are you literally just drinking hot water?
Yeah, I'm just drinking hot water. I usually drink tea, but I just wanted hot water today. I haven't had my water intake, and so I just
You
said,
go, girl. Just heat up that water. Just drink it straight.
yeah, it has no lemon, has nothing. Straight up
Nothing.
hot water. It's not random.
Kind of genius.
Yeah, it also helps with there was a gift that my husband got for Christmas from my sister, and it is a mug that is meant to keep your hands warm. Truly, you just put your hands around it, and it just the way that it is, I guess, shaped, it keeps the hot water in, and it's meant for your hands just to go around it to keep them warm.
That is adorable.
It's adorable. Adorable. A beautiful thing.
So you've been very entrepreneurial. You've created your own version of that.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly it. So that I'm not stealing from my husband. I'm just having to adapt.
So smart, so smart. So when I was preparing for this episode, I wrote down in my blue pen on my sheet, when did we originally meet? I mean, how many years have we known each other now?
Three and a half,
Yeah. I was
three and
gonna
a half.
like maybe 20, like 2021,
I
2020.
think it was mid 2020. I remember one of the first calls I ever had with you was at your dining room table in Pennsylvania, and it was in your kitchen, and it was really dark, and it was this moment where I believe it was when you were coming up with the idea and trying to figure out, like, what do you do first, second, third, and just immediately thinking, okay, I want to work with you, and I know that I can help you.
Yeah, I can remember that very vividly, actually. And it
Yeah.
makes me feel cold thinking about it because Pennsylvania, being in Arizona now, I'm like, oh gosh, if I'm cold now, what would I feel like in Pennsylvania in my dark dining room? But yeah, no, I remember that. And we've worked together, and just full disclosure, like for years, at least a couple of years, I worked with Elizabeth as a coach um, during her time with I Fund Women. And really, I think it really blossomed from, a coaching relationship to a friendship. Kind of, I think you relocated at one point, and then I relocated at one point. And I remember one of like the moments where I was like, yeah, I feel like this. It always felt so good to chat with you. I was pushing, I walked to pick my daughter up from, I think it was preschool. And I walked there, and we had decided, like, sometimes for our calls, we're going to do walks. And it was so therapeutic. I remember walking down the hill, and I was pushing an empty stroller, and I was talking to you, and you were walking, and, it just really felt really nice and different and kind of healthy. And I kind of wanted to go back there for a second because here we are today. And it gives me so much joy to have you on this podcast, which you've been part of, the growth story of behind the scenes, as a coach and someone that I, trusted with, what I was kind of thinking with my business, like you said, kind of coming up with the idea of how am I going to serve women and how do I do this and how do I do that? And I think both of us have come a long way since then.
Mhm.
So that's really fun to talk about.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump into this conversation, and sometimes I do this, and I'm going to do it today. So you're a really interesting, fun person. Uh, in all the conversations, I was always left feeling like that was actually fun, and I would always learn something new, or you would bring something in. And so I'm going to bring in your fun fact, like right up front. So I ask every guest that I have on my show for a fun fact, and I think this fun fact, I've never seen anything like it. So tell me about you have a master naturalist certificate.
I do.
Want to know what that means.
I
And
do.
you have 4 chickens.
Yeah. I moved to Texas a year and a half ago. I moved to San Antonio, Texas specifically, and didn't understand what was really happening in this city and kind of having to figure out how to navigate this space. And was trying to understand how do I come from a lot like Los Angeles and back into Texas and who are my people. So my husband happened to go on a bird watching tour and somebody started chatting with him about this program called the Master Naturalist. And it is a program that is designed on how do you understand the subterranean and the ecology of a space on where you live. And he was really interested in it, but when he came back and saw, like, told me about it, I was beyond ecstatic. And so he said, okay, you really should sign up and do this. And it was a really beautiful space because it took what we had just talked about, these walks that I was doing with a lot of clients, but you in particular, and taking that, and I was already out in nature, and actually then saying, oh, now I can actually learn what this is and how are the native species working together and saying, oh, here is this plant that is meant to actually feed this insect or this animal. And it's been a really beautiful thing that has really grown into more things within where I am in my life now. Um, and so with my Master Naturalist certificate, I get to learn and know native plants. And my entire front yard is only native plants now. And it's learned, I mean, I took up all the grass and figured out how do I make this work. Um, and then in the midst of this, my husband has wanted chickens for a very long time, and he dealt with some grief, and truly all of a sudden, in the midst of his grief, sent me a link and said, hey, here's some chickens for sale on Facebook Marketplace, by the way. And so we went out to this place, picked up 4 chickens that were 4 months old. Somebody couldn't take them anymore because their landlord didn't want them. They said they couldn't have them. So we took them. We were going to name each of the chickens after a golden girl. And then we realized, well, they're all the same type of chicken. So how are we going to tell them apart? So we stuck with one name for the chickens. And so their names are the Dorothys. And they have truly transformed our life in so many ways. I had no idea that I would love a chicken, and I had no idea how funny they were. But that is my fun fact.
That is hilarious.
Yeah, yeah. The Dorothys are great. They actually got put on the news
The
recently.
Dorothy,
Yeah, the Dorothys.
the Golden Girls.
Yeah, but just one.
One name.
Just one name.
That is so funny. So you have all these native plants, and that's really interesting because you're in Texas. So I don't want to go too far down the tangent because I want to get back onto the track of the entrepreneurial journey, but I would love a picture of that. I want to see the native plants. It makes me think of, where I am in Arizona because I've thought about this and I'm like, how does one grow a vegetable in Arizona? I mean, like, but they do. I mean, there's things that I didn't know, like the native plants here, like citrus trees and cotton, and you don't know any of this. And I think it's really cool that you have taken a dive into that. Are you growing any like edible, like fruits or
I
vegetables?
am. We have 4 above ground vegetable boxes. So currently we're growing cauliflower, broccoli, beets, carrots, peas, kale, and we just went to a seed store probably 45 minutes away. Truly middle of nowhere. I think this town has 1,000 people. However, it has this seed store that supplies all over Texas. They have this huge online sale, or online presence, and, we went out and got our seeds for the spring.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a
That's
really
I
important
mean, those
thing.
vegetables, some of them are hard to grow.
They are. They're incredibly hard, and we've done a lot of learning, of figuring out how do you understand what should work, what doesn't, and how can you kind of hold things loosely and flexibly, like really be flexible with kind of that time frame of, you know, something to grow. This actually, it's funny because I am a business coach, it really will feed into that business conversation, which is everything that I coach on, I'm learning around me, which is okay, this has a life of its own. This totally needs, though, some more water, or this needs more soil, or this plant needs more fertilizer, and actually understanding how things are different, but also can work together to make it a beautiful space has been really a cool thing. The biggest hurdle in all of gardening or in anything are things like pests or the unpredictability of weather, truly. I don't know about you in Arizona, but Texas had a freeze last week that got down to something like 15 degrees. And our systems are just not prepared for that. And so you can't really predict and get your garden to a place that it can really withstand that kind of weather. So you do have to hold things loosely to realize like, okay, I'm going to let them go. So I really did the day before it got really cold. I knew it was going to. I did go back out and I said goodbye to some of these plants.
Oh,
I know. I said, okay, I hope I wait. I might see you again. I might not.
oh, that's true. You never know.
You
Sometimes
have no
they're
idea.
like, "Hey, made it. I made it." Um,
Right.
but yeah, you said some great things there, and I think the metaphor is pretty clear. I mean, holding things loosely or hold things loosely as sort of a way to look at a garden, a business,
Mhm.
raising a child. I mean, and it makes me laugh because sidebar, I took one golf lesson in my life. One. People are always like, Amy, you should golf. No, I don't have any interest in that. It doesn't sound fun to me. I took one golf lesson with my husband, and the message from the coach was like, if you were holding a bird right now, that bird would be dead.
Oh my gosh.
You need to loosen your grip. And I'm like, it made me think of that, but it's true. Like with business, with gardening, like there are things that will be out of your control. I love the pests metaphor. Like things come in, things change, the weather, the unpredictability of the economy, the marketplace.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. And
Yeah.
I've written this down and I'm gonna,
You're
find
gonna now text me as you're dealing with stuff at the business. You're like, and now I'm remembering the garden, and now I'm remembering the pests that come in. Yeah.
this. But like in the work that I do and, helping women craft a story or a narrative or, a post for LinkedIn, it's like people come to me with stories. And
Mm,
these stories are sometimes really good and sometimes they're not. And sometimes they came without warning. And sometimes we need to solve for that. And so there's a lot of this, okay, let's like zoom back and let's breathe and let's flip this, let's own this narrative, but let's also accept like what we cannot change here. Like, and so I love your story of the frost, even though that's super unfortunate. In Arizona, they shroud the plants.
mm.
Um, we're actually renting our house, and my landlord texted me. She's like, "Could you cover the plants?" And I was like, "With what?" She's like, "Well, some of them will freeze." I'm like, "Well, like, with what? Like a tarp or something?" She's like, "Old sheets." I'm like, "Girl, I don't have any old sheets." Like, I'm
Yeah, I use it all.
I purged to move here, but in Arizona, people come out and they put, like, sheets and blankets over top of their plants so that they don't freeze, which all is really new and interesting to me, being from Pennsylvania where it rains a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's a totally
Well,
different climate.
and that's exactly it. It's a totally different climate. The climate is shifting and changing. How do you prepare for that? How can you amend the gardens that you have, or what you thought was that subterranean, which, in your area is probably cacti, which is the area that I grew up in, West Texas, or where I came from in LA. It was very much that kind of same terrain. However, learning about all of this really was like, okay, but how can these plants stay hardy and shift alongside things like climate change that's coming? And can we then do we have to shift our garden for this? And so you look at that when it comes to a business and you think about the marketplaces, and how do you look at the business clientele? Is this the right clientele for my business? And maybe when your business first started, because looking at you and looking at what we were first doing at the very beginning is not what you're happened now. It's very different. And so figuring out and saying, okay, how can I be able to adapt? How do I shift this idea to fit this need for this different community? I still have the tools. I still have the ability to really do this and make that kind of impact that you're wanting to make. But you just have to be willing to, like I said, hold it loosely.
Yeah. It's a really, really amazing takeaway, and it's very true. I think as a business owner, being able to zoom out and look at the landscape is
Mhm.
something that, I know you and I would do when we talked. And I've been consistently doing, kind of paying attention to like, okay, what's working and what's not working, and how is this received? And would I want to do that again? And not being laser focused on like, this is how it's going to be, and it's got to work. Like it's just got to work. And that doesn't work because ultimately when you're just getting started, you don't really know what these people need or want or what they're willing to pay for. And sometimes they don't either. And it is a journey, and, so this metaphor is perfect, for the journey of an entrepreneur, which never ends, by the way. It continues to evolve and shift and change, um, for me and I think for most people that I work with, but I wanna pause and pivot, um, this podcast this season. I've started getting laser focused on the big moves women make to win in business. With you as an observer to your success, you have not only made your own moves as a business owner, you've made big moves, and we'll talk about some of the big moves. But you're constantly helping other women make theirs, right? And it's really powerful. And I wrote this down. Before you were a coach, you were an entrepreneur. And I think it's really unique. And I want to point it out, now because yes, I worked with Elizabeth. She was a coach of mine. I've had other coaches. Um, but what Elizabeth brings, and you're seeing that. I'm already seeing that in this conversation because I feel like I feel like I'm on a coaching call with you, and it is like bringing back all the feels, and I'm like, I really miss you. I think we need to talk more.
Do that.
But yeah, this idea of yeah, there's so many coaches out there who would be willing to take your money to help you with your business or your problems or whatever it is. Um, but you are a coach who was an entrepreneur first. And so I want to talk about you as the entrepreneur
Oh,
and the business that you started
yeah.
before this coaching thing was even on the radar. So can you tell us about your business that you founded?
I founded, it started as a food business. And the reason it started was because I was diagnosed with celiac disease plus additional food allergies, so specifically to corn, avocado, quinoa. And when I was diagnosed, yeah, yes, I always love when I say I'm allergic to avocado. People's faces are like, "What? How is that
Power
possible?"
food. It's a power food. It's a superfood.
I know Goop and I are not friends because of this. It's like the one thing, like Goop, like I think refers it all the time. I was at my doctor's office and I was in grad school at the time and was then just given a sheet that said, okay, good luck. And that was it. So I didn't know how to navigate this. I was thousands of miles away from my mom, my home. And when you were given this diagnosis and thinking, okay, well, what do I eat? This is really difficult. Um, I then just went back to, at the time, my house that I was renting with my roommate and took out everything based off of this list. And I think I had one thing left in the cabinet that in the refrigerator that actually adhered to the full list that I was given. And oftentimes people will hear my story and they will say something like, "Oh yeah, I went on an elimination diet before." And this is to the absolute extreme. So you are thinking maltodextrin, xanthan gum, any of the byproducts from corn, I'm allergic to. I could not eat. So I had to literally, I mean, everything. So it's taking that elimination diet to the extreme. And so when I realized that I had this pain point, it actually led to another thing, which was, and this goes into both of my companies. One was this like absolute loneliness. I could no longer just easily go out with people, and I had to learn how to create meals. And so I just did a lot of inviting people into my home because I couldn't actually participate with other people outside of my four walls without getting sick. So I finished grad school, went on a journey of a completely different direction. And I kept having this thought of why am I why am I not helping people? I'm trying to help myself. How do I figure this out? And so about 6 weeks into my marriage, I decided, hey, guess what? We're going to start a business. And that's how my first company started. I started as a catering company to really cater for people with food allergies and to have I was calling uh, making sure that the menu was inclusive. And so that looked like nobody should be left out of the conversation because they cannot participate in the food that is being served. Then that led into the additional step after that, which is a product. And I created a gluten-free cookie company. And that was formed out of, I created this really cool recipe that started to get write-ups. I was like, well, if somebody's just already like creating the write-ups for it and sharing the recipe, I should just sell this. So I started selling it to local coffee shops in Los Angeles. And that led to getting picked up by a couple big, large names, which I can go into in a moment. But that is how, because of all of this journey, because of the just truly understanding that there is a pain point that I actually experienced and that there wasn't a solution out there. That's why I began to be an entrepreneur in the first place. Um, Drive is really helpful too. So I had the drive to find a solution. I am an extrovert who needs to be around people. I didn't want to let my food allergies and my celiac disease stop me from actually getting to participate in the conversations that other people were having. So that was really the impetus for starting these companies.
What was the name of the company?
So very first one was Mary Lee Catering. That changed into our company with our products was Mary Lee Kitchen. And that
Awesome.
was named after my grandmother.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, Mary Lee. And so to help fund the business, this is going to really make a whole lot of sense to you as to where I ended up at iFund Women. To help fund the business, I started a crowdfunding campaign and I ran a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter. And gosh, I want to say the year was 2014 or 15. And at the time, Kickstarter was fairly new. Um, but what was even scarier is that only about 3% or less of food companies ever got funded through crowdfunding. And that's kind of still how it is to this day. And I thought, well, I'm going to risk it. Let's do it. So my husband, who is a gamer, and really big into board games is what it is, and he utilizes Kickstarter almost as like how most people use Amazon. He uses that as Kickstarters for that for him. Anyhow, he just led me to some different blogs and podcasts and conversations that people were having online about crowdfunding. And so I really learned how to crowdfund successfully. And so I ran a successful Kickstarter campaign. The reason I tell you that is because I had multiple people who were having a Kickstarter campaign at the same time who got a staff picked, was successful at, I don't know, their video or whatever. It was bright and shiny. They didn't get the funding. And the way that Kickstarter works is that it's an all or nothing platform. So you kind of, if you don't reach your goal, you get none of the funding. So I got my funding. I
Mm.
reached it. And and ever since then, I have had people right and left asking, how did you do this? What did you do? And I've just continued to help other people.
So did it help that the product that you were putting out there was so specifically niched?
It didn't. I think that's a really good question. There was only at the time one other really big gluten-free company, and this was Mary's Gone Crackers, and I became friends with them. They had had enough funding to be able to have their own space and warehouse. But I was in Los Angeles at a time when there wasn't even like a gluten-free industrial kitchen around. So I was having to bake all of these in my own home and had to have the health department come in on an every 6-week basis to check my home, see if the status was the same. It was a wild ride because everybody thinks they look at Los Angeles as this huge curve of look at the whatever craze is happening in LA, it'll happen eventually, but very much hippie granola style. But the fact that I had a gluten-free cookie company and there wasn't even a place to produce them is where I was in the market. It was very early on.
Wow. So, I mean, what did you do how did you make it successful? The Kickstarter.
Well, so I will tell you a backtrack. How did that start? I'll tell you why I had to crowdfund. I had a buyer come to me. They had tried my cookies and I was selling to very random people all over LA. People would come and call me up. I would go to Melrose. I mean, you would name it. I was anywhere and everywhere. And one of those people was a buyer for Target. And Target had told me, we love what you're doing, but this means that we would like to have you in a like worldwide international distribution, because at the time they did not have a program set up that was actually for small women-owned businesses. So here I am, very small niche company in LA who was looked at by a large space and said, okay, this would be great. How can I make this happen? I started trying to figure out who could actually manufacture this, especially because, like I said, they had to be celiac friendly. Found a manufacturer down in San Diego, and they were willing to produce the cookies and distribute them on behalf of Target. But I had to be in something like, it was wild. I wanted to say this is a really wild number, but something like 200,000 stores. And where do you find the money? So
Well,
that's why I turned to Kickstarter, and I was trying to find all different avenues, trying to find the funds to say, okay, how can I get into Target? What do I need to do? How can I push this forward? The amount I raised on Kickstarter was great, but there was nothing in the grand scheme of what I needed. So you're looking at a very small niche company that's needing, can only make $10,000. That's really quickly overnight needing like $2 million and a very short window to be able to try and do this. I was speaking to banks, I was speaking to loan officers, VC. I was not a VC backable company. And so, which is actually why I think I focus a lot of my business coaching on more um, business service companies or companies that might not ever be VC backable. Um, because I wasn't. And I was told that over and over and over again. But just because I wasn't VC backable, does that mean I shouldn't exist?
Yeah.
And so that's what led me to that. And I had to make a big decision, a very tough decision, which was, do I continue in the route that I was going of these cookies, of this company, and pouring time, energy, and effort into something that just didn't seem to be working and taking off like I really needed it to financially? So I had to really close that down.
Okay. So I guess the moral of the story is, I mean, this is a really interesting story. I kind of feel like there's this case study around it. Is there a case study? Did you like produce anything? Has anyone ever done anything around this story?
I didn't, but there's a recent conversation with a large company who runs an accelerator program who asked if I could come and tell this story to them because they said they need entrepreneurs to know that you can still make it if you don't succeed in your business. And I said, yeah, you can. But there's not a case study. No, you can make one. I'll let you.
Well, I mean,
You're
because
the writer.
well, I will be writing something about this. We'll see. But it's really interesting because I mean, the visuals that you painted there, I mean, you're in LA, you're in an apartment, you've created a gluten-free kitchen, you're baking out of there, you're selling to local businesses, and there was nothing in the market.
There's nothing.
And now there's tons.
Tons.
So were you too soon? You know, were like there's these things that were thrown up in your face. The Target wanted it.
Mhm.
It's like, and that's what you listed as your big win. I mean, being asked to submit your products to Target is massive. It's massive. You described it. Like you need it 2 million, like to make 2 million, like dollars instead of 10,000. And how do you get there? And you have to get there so fast. And the system really isn't set up to support you. And they're, you know, do you think you were too soon in the market? Because like what happened after that? Like with the gluten-free, celiac
Uh,
friendly food business?
I mean, they blew up. Absolutely blew up. Um, yes, I think I was too soon. I think I knew I was doing it initially for me. And then when I realized there were so many people who really needed this product, then I thought, "Ah, man, I have to keep going. It's not just for me, it's for a lot of people who were in that parking lot of a doctor's office with a piece of paper and no direction." I think the biggest thing is that nobody understood that it was going to be the kind of craze. And I gotta say, because this is the life that I lead, it's not a craze for me. It's the reality that I am in. So I think that I didn't have the buy-in. Mary's Gone Crackers had a big buy-in because they kind of had that market space already. But um, when larger CPGs, so consumer packaged goods is what that stands for, companies started to look at the marketplace and say, we need to really buy some of the smaller companies, then gluten-free took off. Absolutely took off.
Got it. And it begs the question because now on so many menus and so many restaurants, there are gluten-free options. Like, is that bullshit? Like, you know, like if the kitchen itself isn't a gluten-free kitchen, are they still, you know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to
Oh,
ask the question.
totally is. I mean, the reality is, and I learned so much about this, I actually ended up, because I felt like I was a fraud, I actually ended up going back and getting my certificate of nutrition and health because I thought, man, people are going to call me out because I don't have this specific kind of education, which is a whole nother thing. Imposter syndrome is real, people. I've experienced it for sure. Um, but I think what ended up happening, so one of the restaurants, funny enough, in LA actually started to let me utilize their kitchen as my workspace. And I was going in under the table and after hours to bake my cookies. And in trade, what we would do is I actually gave them all their gluten-free desserts. So are all restaurants, are they capable of being, quote unquote, fully gluten-free? No, it's areas shared, things are there, everything is probably cross-contaminated. There's a lot of that within the like health space. What I've recently told my doctors, my GI, I said, here's the deal. I have to still live in this world and I have to kind of build up the tolerance. So I was encouraged by an allergist one time. The best way to build up your tolerance is just like make sure you have a little bit of it. Don't completely avoid everything, because if you do, it's going to have that much longer of a negative side effect when you end up like coming and like encountering it. As I've mentioned earlier, I'm an extrovert. Becoming a bubble girl was not going to ever happen to me. Like I was like, I don't think so. So I needed to be able to have that, right? Like, so
Yeah.
there's that space. But within business, within my own story and journey, I knew that I couldn't solve everybody's issue problem. If somebody is more celiac than not, if they can't have cross contamination, I couldn't do everything for everyone. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, because I was trying to. Um, but we really can't. So, what is the product that you can actually create that honestly I would enjoy? Is really start how I started thinking about it.
Yeah. So I didn't know this. I mean, I knew that you had a company. I didn't know the full story, right? And now I know so much more of the story. And what I really love about this story, and you said this, is at a certain point, you were like, okay, I have to walk.
Mhm.
And that's real. I mean, that happens, right? And actually, the quicker you get to that point, sometimes, like we talked about, like, holding things too tightly, squeezing the bird, like whatever it is. How did you make that decision to walk away from that? And then second part of it is, how did it set you up for your next big win?
Mm. Walking away was hard, and it was incredibly difficult to make the decision. There were a lot of tears and there were a lot of walking, like truly walking. I mean, I'd walk hours and hours on a daily basis. And I finally came back to a few things. First off, in all transparency, my marriage was not going well at that time. And I was walking with my husband one night. We were chatting about my business, and all I could talk about was my business. Never really gave him the space or the time or the energy. And we chatted of, what do I need to make this business really work? And how do we make sure, money it was a part of like what we all need to make it work. And it wasn't just that I needed money for the business, but I needed to be able to contribute financially to the partnership that I had honestly vowed to be in. And when I put that into my scenario and into my story, I realized how much I had been taking from a lot of people around me, from friends who were willing to deliver things to my husband, who was truly willing to give up an inheritance that he received to be able to help fund my business, to the only thing I was asking for from friends and family was buy from me or give me money, period. And during my walks and conversation and reflection times, I realized this is not the life that I want to live. And what's tough about that is that I don't share this very often, because what happens is people will say, well, you are a woman in business. This is what it takes to be a woman in business. Who cares about your husband? He's not supportive. Your friends should be more supportive. You can have more friends. But that's really like a really shitty situation to be in. And I say to people constantly, but I chose my friends before my business even began. And I chose my husband before I even started this business. So why wouldn't I choose them now? And why does this business have to come first and foremost? And why does the money have to continue to be the thing that I have to go after? So when it was finally clear and I made that decision to close down, I pivoted everything and whatever funds I had into a new space that was all about connection and overcoming loneliness. Because at the core of what I was doing and what I was building was, sure, it was helping solve this problem of food, but I was so incredibly lonely because here are these people who loved me, but I couldn't even turn to them because I didn't know how to even have conversations with them anymore.
Yeah.
So, did a lot of research, and my master's is in leadership and focus on youth, family, and culture. So, for 2.5 years, all I did was study leadership. And I thought, okay, I promise it's in my brain. I promise there's papers written about this. I know I can do this. What do I need to go back to? And I realized a few things, which was the only thing that I was doing in LA is, how can you serve me? And in response, that person would always ask, well, how can you serve me in return? And I was like, well, that's just annoying. Everybody talks about what they did for a living. Nobody really actually talked about who they were. So my win and how I pivoted is that I created this space. It was called Ampersand Dinner. It was still related to food because I wanted to gather people around a beautiful meal. And it was connecting people through food and conversations. And we took away anybody's ability to talk about what they did for a living. Are you kidding me? If somebody doesn't know how to say, like, if you can't talk about what you do for a living, like, nobody knows how to say anything. And truly, it's like, I guess the weather is good or really nice today. Like, this is all you know how to really talk about. So I created prompts to help really guide people. So we would have thematic dinners as well. So these would be themes would include like women founders, and still not talking about business though. We would talk about social justice was a big one, money, but I really wanted to push people to really have deeper conversations and connections. I started the very first one with 3 people who didn't know each other. I knew all of them. I led the conversation. That was in 2016 or 17 was the very first one. And by the time I closed the business, and I closed on because I chose to, um, I had had over 1,900 people come through a dinner.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah, I know, isn't it fun?
I love the idea of the prompts and the themes. I was gonna say, it's really nice the way you describe it. You can't talk about what you do for a living, so it becomes this great equalizer of, okay, we're just going to talk about a topic,
Yep.
and it doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter, what you do for a living. I mean,
That's exactly it. That's
yeah.
exactly it. The more that we can recognize our own ability to see humanity and see a person for who they are, the deeper a conversation could really go versus an exchange of just goods and services, period.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I'm guessing, and you might be pulling some of that into not only what you're doing as a coach, but what you're starting to set up and launch now with your latest business endeavor.
Yes.
Um, so
Yeah.
I want to talk about that. Let's talk about now and thank you, by the way. I have to stop and thank you. The story about walking away from the gluten-free cookie company, like, brought tears to my eyes.
Mm.
I mean, it also reminded me of The Devil Wears Prada when she
Yeah. Yes. Oh my
throws
gosh. I
her
think
phone in
that,
a fountain in Paris.
yeah, absolutely. To this day, still like my favorite movie because I resonate with it so much.
Yeah, you're like, "Yep, that's me right there," and,
Yeah, absolutely.
the boyfriend, of course, the guy from Entourage, but anyway, it was such a powerful story, and it just really I wanna thank you for sharing the depths of this was what was going on. It was becoming everything, it was becoming too much, And I think it's really powerful to hear you talk about choosing friends and family over this isolating life, which was, I mean, it seems like it was going really well and then it started getting really stressful. And I think it goes back to what you said. I mean, be flexible and hold things loosely. If you took a step back at that time and you were like, this is creating a lot of stress in my life, I think it's so hard for people to walk away from it. I think some people are actually magnetized,
Mhm.
like, and it becomes part of who they are is like this constant state of stress. Maybe that's like part of like this, the DNA of an entrepreneur is like, and I, thinking about you in LA and running around and trying to meet with banks and like, kitchen in your house and, doing everything and doing all the things that people tell you that like you got to be obsessed, like you have to do it all. You have to go for it. And so really like, yeah, the big win of being asked to submit the products to Target turned into this actual win of saying, you know what, I need to decide that it's time to move forward without this business. But you didn't leave everything behind.
I didn't. I didn't leave everything behind, and I learned how to kind of shift, pivot, and really make better decisions. I also I think something comes up when we neglect our health. We are also forgetting that this is the one body we will ever have. And talk about prevention in your health is, hey, if we're actually paying attention to where our body is and what's happening and the heart palpitations I would have, or the fact that I had to go on these like hour-long walks every day just to feel like I could breathe, that's very telling. It's not this like, "Hey, let us think through what are things you can do after you cause this." It's like, actually, what is the root of what's really happening in here? And is this what I'm really meant to do? And is this okay to keep going and making this work? Because sure, there's a lot of things that we have to do in our life that we don't want to do. So I don't really want to have a job. I don't want to sit in a desk all day. But there are choices within a lot of this. First is the choice of, is this the way that you look at the world? That is a choice. The way that you handle and walk through the world, that is a choice. The fact that I now live in a urban area in San Antonio, Texas, and have a farm, like that's my choice. I want to be able to live in a space that helps me breathe and gives me opportunity to shift my focus at the end of a day.
It's incredible. It really is. And I think if, people who are listening to this, if you're taking something away from this, let it be this. Listen to your body. This resonates with me 1,000%. I went through an experience that we won't get into today, but total like body shutdown when I was doing too much. And there's this fear, I think, that exists of if I let this go, what will be on the other side? And I don't want to find out because what if it's nothing? And what if this failure means that I have failed? And it's just not the case. There's always something on the other side. One business is not the ultimate end all be all. It's just one business. It's just one idea. It's just one product. There are so many more. And for someone of an entrepreneurial mindset, the ideas will continue to flow even if you take a break, right? You take a break. I do this too. Sometimes over the summer, I take a break and I think to myself, maybe I won't go back to working and maybe I won't do it. Maybe I'll take more time off. And every single time when the end of the summer comes, I am so like ready to dig back in. And I'm so ready to take it to whatever that next level is. When I say next level, and I think I mentioned this too, I read a book called Company of One.
Mhm.
It changed my mindset. In the business world, I think there's this thing that exists where we're like, we need to be bigger, we need to scale, we need to go, we need to be big, we need to be a huge company, we need to have employees, we need to. No. Okay, because at the end of the day, your health and your balance and your mental state is equally or not equally is more important than your business.
Right.
So finding the balance where you're saying, this is enough, I'm comfortable, I'm saving, I'm growing, I am not balls to the wall. I am not stressed. I am not losing my hair. I am not, and so, and all these things happen. So I think you saying, I'm bouncing, I'm out, making the conscious decision. And then the proof is that you moved to another business and you took the learnings and you created this really successful dinner program. And then you became a coach and you started working with iFund Women. And now, you have all this amazing experience. You've worked with all of these. How many women do you think you've worked with over the course of your career?
Somebody counted recently and said that I am close to 1,200.
It's amazing.
Yeah, 1,200 businesses. Not wild.
It's really wild. It's really amazing, but everyone who's listening can feel this. Like you're so good at this. You're so good at what you do. You bring all this incredible knowledge, but the vibe, like the substance is really there and it's really unique. Um, I want to talk about your latest business venture.
Yeah. So now that you've heard kind of everything from master naturalist to the chickens to my business coaching and my failures in between, there are two opportunities that are happening. So a friend of mine and I are starting something called the Slow Business Retreats. And these retreats are for women. It's not just women. It is for entrepreneurs that are searching to do things in a more slow, holistic way to still lead them to profitability and ensure that they have space to breathe, to create, and have a better sense of who they are and I think a more clear understanding of their own company. These retreats were really designed out of some of the conversations that you and I had, Amy, these walks that we did. The fact that I was outside and could talk in a space that felt more creative and tangible. The person who I have partnered with, her name is Maggie Gentry, and she is what is called a slow marketer. And her entire belief and system is how can you market yourself and your business in ways that are not just social media or in ways that are not just paid ads and not that kind of that feeling of hustle. This feeling that comes from, oh my gosh, if I don't post at this time and if it's not this particular caption, then I'm no longer relevant. And the final piece of these retreats is coming back down to a holistic space of who we are. So we are adding in a spiritual direction side, no matter your religion or your background or your faith. We are incorporating this last piece of spirituality that says there's something that needs to be tapped into. You can all probably hear me. I do a lot of like, yes, I'm gluten free and I am have a garden, but Amy can also attest this. I'm probably one of the most furthest from woo woo. Probably you would probably like think like that's probably not a word that anyone would ever really use to describe me. And so when I talk about the spiritual side, I'm not looking to have it be this woo woo space. I don't know if that's offensive or not to say, but I look at it as this we are all seekers and we need sometimes to have somebody help lead us as we're seeking.
100%.
Yeah. So those are the
Amazing.
thanks. So those are the three elements of the business retreat, slow business. And from that is then taking it even further. And I am getting back into coaching and having strictly just doing coaching on my own and taking that into the principles, like these principles into practice um, through my own coaching practice.
Which will be wildly successful.
Thank you.
I want to talk just for a second about this idea of slow marketer and slow business because I didn't, until you just described it to me, I did not connect the dots. I should have on this idea of slow marketing. We talked about this. We
Mhm.
definitely talked about this. I was either walking or driving. I know
Yeah.
exactly what I was doing when we talked about this. I said, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to Starbucks and go through the drive-through during our coaching call because that's what I feel like doing right now. And you hit the like you hit the nail on the head because taking someone out of their little, bubble, if you will, like at the desk in front of the laptop, on the Zoom or whatever, taking them out of that, even for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, is a really necessary and welcome shift in the day. And I remember our conversation because I was like feeling really happy. I was outside, it was sunny. I was headed to one of my favorite places, which I'm trying to get off that habit. But um, and sometimes when you're work from home entrepreneur, like you got to get out. Okay. There are only so many options. Okay. So sometimes I go to the local coffee shop and I say hello to the barista, and that's my social engagement. I mean, you talk about this extrovert thing. Like I need it. I can't for if it rains or I have to stay inside for a couple of days, my husband's like, you clearly need to get out. Yes, I clearly need to get out. But I was going through the drive-through and we were talking, and gosh, this is so case in point. This podcast, I think we were talking about this podcast, and I said to you something like, I put a lot of pressure on myself to produce a lot of content. And the podcast is one of the pieces of the content that I produce. It is very strategic. It is a marketing channel for me. A lot of people don't get that. They're like, so how much do you get paid for that? I'm like, like, girl, like you think that, I have some big sponsor like ESPN. No, I am an independent creator. And the whole strategy of the podcast is relationship building and networking. And it is an incredible platform for all of those things. Um, And I have built my business. I have closed clients immediately after interviews. Okay. It's finding your niche and it's finding what works. And you said to me, you're like, Amy, do you really think your target customers care how often you produce an episode? And I was like, no, they
Yeah,
they don't give a shit.
they don't.
And it was like this moment in time for me where I'm like, she is so right. This is all self-inflicted pressure. The women that I want to work with, the women that I am working with, they might not even like they might listen to their own episode once. They might listen to a couple other ones, but it was so dead on and it shifted my mindset because I'm like, I'm creating enough content. I've created tons of content since I started my business. I don't need to keep producing like, week over week over week over week. Like, what is that? I mean, the content, it's out there, it speaks for itself. So much of it is evergreen in nature, right? It can be reused, reproduced. But as a business owner and a marketer in today's world, there is so much pressure to be seen constantly in social. And it's overkill, it's draining, it is not sustainable. And I know women that are doing it now. I mean, I can see it happening out there. Women that I talk to, women that I work with, putting the pressure on. We're not showing up. We're not showing up enough. I need to show up more. I need to take more pictures of myself. And I'm like, no, what you need to do is you need to slowly build your reputation and you need to become very referable.
Absolutely.
And we talked about that too. The referrals become the lifeblood of the business. And so I have you to thank for that like breakthrough moment. And it makes so much sense. These slow business retreats, like take the pressure off,
Yeah,
slow down.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and now let me tell you one reason I also believe this. There is no way and no small business that has the marketing budget needed to compete with the big companies. And so the algorithms, the everything that you're ending up getting, you could probably do that through a different marketing channel and through even like a phone call with people versus trying to feel like you have to stay on top of a game that it doesn't fit who you are. Um, my husband and I are starting a new venture. We're opening up a wine bar in San Antonio, and I was talking to somebody, and his very first response, he has no idea what my background is. He said, "Well, the first thing you need to go do is get your social media handle." thought, okay, fine, sure, we'll get it, whatever. And we did. And I've thought about what would we even say? We're a year out from opening. What's the point of even having this? But they were like, but just build it up. It's going to be the greatest thing. And I just thought to myself, you know what? I'm sick and tired of being told by big, large companies led by men, by the way, which all of us women are like, oh, we're just going to do this. We're feminists and we're going to make this. And I'm like, all these men are telling us to do this. That's what social media really is. And it's basically to sell ourselves and the thoughts that we had who are going to, why are we doing that? Versus instead, why don't we find the ways and the opportunities that really are going to connect with the audience that we want and that are right for who we are? We have a voice too. We have value. We get to actually make the impact that we want to make. We don't have to adhere to all of the rules and the rituals that society tells us we have to. And when we can own that for ourselves, especially as small businesses, we can stay in that space and be even more comfortable. The hardest thing is that we are also driven into a world of celebrity entrepreneurship. So that loneliness piece feeds into this. So we turn to social media as our outlet, thinking this is how we are going to get connected. That's not where you need to be connected. I have friends who are on Twitch. That is a more connectable platform. Discord, more connectable platform. But how often are small businesses going on there to advertise? They're not, because that is a community that if you go and advertise, they're like, what are you doing? Get out of here. They literally try and kick you out. I did it one time. That's how I know. I was like, ooh, rough crowd.
No hard.
Um, and we're all at the root of it trying to find not just our marketing opportunity, but we're trying to feel connected to something. And so I really encourage people, take a step back, pause. Where do you feel the best? Where do you most feel connected to who you are? And if you don't know what that is yet, I encourage you to spend some time really searching and seeking that out.
Yeah, and as you were talking about the wine bar, which congratulations, by the way, that's very exciting. I started thinking, yeah, how would I market that differently? You
Mhm.
know, and actually, I'm going to throw a challenge down, and I'm not saying you should do this, but how could you market a wine bar in today's world without social media?
Funny enough, I've already thought about it. So, because of my background with the ampersand dinners, I think a big part of it is to start first and foremost with small gatherings and invite people first that we know. And even the way that I'm fundraising is only within the community that I live in, and the town, like the little community next to us, are the only people I'm tapping into for to be investors in the space. I'm not doing big money, anything like that. The reason for that is the heart of this space is a community space. It's not because I'm a wine snob. It's not like, which if you are, great, I could be, but that's not why we want to create this. There isn't a place for community in my neighborhood after hours. There's a coffee shop, but there's not after hours.
Yeah.
That's what
I actually watched the series. I think it's called Live to 100. It's about the centurions.
I heard
Um,
about it yesterday.
yeah, and what you're saying, you should watch it because what you're saying is what they talked about. These communities of people that live to over 100 super saturated areas of the world. Now, spoiler alert, a couple of them are isolated islands and beautiful places, but um, one of the themes is gathering on a regular basis and with the same people, making it a habit and laughing and having fun. So I think this plays right into everything that you're doing. Everything's connected. All the stories are connected. They always are. I can see ampersand being part of the wine bar. I could see, the slow business, the slow marketing approach being part of the wine bar, the retreats. I think it's all really beautiful, really to think about. And I'm so excited to watch it unfold. Um, Not on social media. No, just kidding.
I'll make
Of course, we'll see it, right? But it'll be strategic and The thing that I really love about marketing is finding a way to create materials or, a marketing strategy that is exclusively for who you want to serve. And it doesn't matter, like you said with the cookie, but like you can't make everyone happy and not everyone will gravitate to, any business. But the people that it resonates with, the people that feel like, oh yeah, I might need to do that. I might need to go. This sounds like it's for me. I need to learn more, will come.
Mhm. Absolutely will. Absolutely will. I want to say one last thing. I realized this in thinking about even some of your former guests and thinking about the wins, your podcast. Um, I think one of the biggest wins and my takeaways from owning my own company early on and the hustle mentality that I had was that I had very little fear of going after and talking to people who I had no idea what their role was in a company, but really pitching myself into front of big names and who had big titles. And I think when I could take that on to the next thing and realizing we're all just people, we're all just trying to figure this out. And if we continue to remember that the person next door to us is a human being, not somebody who is annoying us as our neighbor or leaving the trash out, or that person on social media also maybe had a hard day, like whatever it is, remember at the end of it, we are all human beings and we all deserve the opportunity for food, water, and shelter. And that is the equality. And if we can lead through equality and equitable components, that's how I can make these decisions because I want to look at the how it can affect the whole.
Amazing. I
Yes.
want to end there. I mean, there is no better way to end this episode than with what you just said. Um, I want to include before we, click the record button again, just the name of the business, Slow Business Retreats. What's the URL?
It's just slowbusinessretreats.com.
Slowbusinessretreats.com. And where can people find you, connect with you on social?
LinkedIn is where I can be connected. And then elizabethcolliereichhorn.com. That's where you can find my website.
Amazing. I will include all of that in the show notes. I took so much away from this. I always do. It's been so refreshing to see you and chat with you and learn about everything that you've done and that you're doing and all of your sort of beautiful angles that you bring to your
Thanks.
businesses and really the world. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Seriously, it's been fun.
You are so welcome. Thanks, Elizabeth.